I know the world is constantly rushing, and you probably have 100 reasons to skip this video. I wouldn't blame you. So, if you're still here, even just for a few seconds, thank you. Truly. I'm sharing this story not because I'm brave, but because for years, I stayed quiet. I was erased. And now, I'm finally ready to speak. All I hope is that somewhere in this story, you'll find even the smallest reminder that you're not invisible, and that you were never alone. If you feel that, just leave a quiet sign, a gentle tap on the like button, to let me know someone out there is still listening. They were perfect, as always. Emma with her flawless eulogy, quoting Dad's favorite philosophers like she'd lived in his mind. Aaron shook hands like a polished politician, bowing his head with just enough sadness to appear noble. And me? I sat in the back row, next to a broken heater, and behind a pillar that blocked half the altar. My name wasn't listed in the program. There was no seat saved for me, no photo of me in the slideshow. Just old images of them, the true heirs, on camping trips I was never invited to, birthday dinners where my seat was mysteriously already taken. I didn't cry. I didn't stand. I didn't interrupt. I just listened to every word they said, every carefully curated half-truth, every memory that edited me out like a smudge on glass. When the will was read at the post-service gathering, inside Dad's old law office, the air smelled of mahogany and lemon oil. Emma crossed her legs like she was waiting for a performance review. Aaron leaned back like it was already his. The lawyer read it calmly. Emma received the lakeside house. Aaron got the family company shares, a trust fund, jewelry, bonds, sentimental items. Then a pause. For my youngest, Caroline. The room stilled. My breath stopped. Nothing is listed. No explanation, no footnote, just silence. Aaron barely hid his grin. Emma looked away, as if the words were too awkward to acknowledge. My fingers dug into the worn leather armrest. I felt something rise in me. Not tears, not rage. Something colder. A familiar void, expanding inside my chest. But then, the lawyer cleared his throat. There is one more thing. He looked at me, really looked at me, and slid an envelope across the table. I was instructed to give this to you privately, after. Emma's jaw twitched. Aaron sat forward, but I stood slowly, took the envelope with both hands, and left without a word. Outside, the winter wind slapped my face, but I barely felt it. The world was spinning slow. Controlled. Like time was waiting for me to catch up. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, and sealed with red wax. My name, just Caroline, was written in Dad's unmistakable hand. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't over. It hadn't even started. Growing up, I learned to measure love in leftover time. Emma had ballet recitals, Aaron had football games, and I had a seat at the end of the dinner table. Their trophies covered the living room shelves. My science fair ribbon stayed in a kitchen drawer until it got tossed out with the coupons. I remember once, I must have been 7, I spent days making a necklace for Mom out of paper beads and safety pins. I wrapped it in tissue paper and wrote, "To the best mommy," in green crayon. When I handed it to her, she smiled tightly, turned it in her hands, and said, "Oh, honey. This is a bit messy, isn't it? Next time, ask Emma to help you." She placed it on the counter. The next morning, it was gone. Dad saw it, I think. He didn't say anything. He never really did. But he paused when he saw me watching. He gave me a weak smile and patted my head like I was some neighbor's kid. Kind. Distant. Polite. Aaron once told me to stop tagging along on their hikes. Said I slowed them down. I was 9. I'd brought trail mix. Emma would laugh when I wore Dad's old t-shirts around the house, whispering, "You look like a hand-me-down." They weren't cruel. Not exactly. They were trained, groomed, sharpened. I was the unpolished one, the soft corner in a house of straight lines. Even in family photos, I was always off to the side, never in the center, like a placeholder someone forgot to crop out. Still, I tried. I stayed quiet when my paintings were dismissed as abstract mess. I smiled when my birthday gifts were accidentally forgotten. I convinced myself that maybe I just didn't shine as brightly, that some people are stars and others are shadows. But now, holding that envelope in my hand, something shifted. What if it wasn't just forgetfulness? What if it was intentional? Because forgotten children don't get private envelopes sealed in wax. It started with birthdays. I'd call. No one would answer. I'd send a gift. No response. Then, weeks later, Emma would post photos. Balloons, wine, laughter. I was never tagged. Once, I commented, "Wish I'd known, would have loved to be there." She replied, "You changed numbers. We thought you didn't want to come." I hadn't changed numbers, not once. Then there was the Christmas I sent a long letter to Dad. Handwritten, just like he used to like. I never got a reply. Aaron told me later Dad had been too sick to respond. But a neighbor, Mrs. Larkin, mentioned seeing him in the garden that week, pruning the roses. "He looked peaceful," she said. He was humming, holding what looked like a letter. Mine? I remember the day my login to the family group account stopped working. Bank notices, family updates, shared records, all gone. When I asked Emma, she said, "Oh, must have been a glitch. I'll fix it." She never did. At first, I brushed it all off. I'm just overly sensitive, I thought, always imagining patterns where there aren't any. Maybe it was just bad timing, miscommunication. But then Mira, the old housekeeper, came up to me after the memorial. Her hands were calloused, her voice low. "I used to see your letters, tucked behind the fruit bowl. Your father always read them in the study. He kept them in his drawer." I blinked. "He read them?" She nodded. "Every one. Talked about you all the time, quietly, like a secret he wanted to keep safe." A weight shifted in my chest. For the first time in years, the fog began to lift. Not enough to see everything, but enough to sense a shape in the dark. Someone was erasing me. Not the universe. Not fate. Someone. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew this. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgotten. I was hidden. I waited until after the house emptied. The reception was over. The fake mourners had left with paper plates and wine-stained smiles. Aaron and Emma were at the lawyer's office finishing paperwork they assumed only concerned them. I had one destination: Dad's study. I hadn't stepped foot in that room for over 5 years. It still smelled like cedar wood, dust, and pipe tobacco. That quiet kind of comfort that made you think someone had just stepped out for a moment, not forever. The furniture was untouched. His old typewriter on the side table, globe by the bookshelf. A mug with dried coffee rings still sat on the coaster. I walked slowly, deliberately, until I reached the desk. Bottom drawer. That's what the letter had said. It was locked. I ran my hand beneath the drawer, under the lip of the wooden panel, and felt the unmistakable scrape of duct tape. My fingers trembled as I peeled it off. A key. I slid it into the lock. It clicked like a whisper. Inside was a single item, a black leather-bound notebook frayed at the edges, wrapped in a red ribbon. On the front, in fading gold letters, were 4 words: "To my real heir." My throat tightened. I untied the ribbon, my fingers stiff with disbelief. Page 1. "Caroline, if you're reading this, they've already turned the tables. Don't let them make you doubt yourself again. I left clues. I left pieces. But they buried them. I never stopped loving you. I just failed to fight hard enough. This is me, trying again." Each page after that was a different kind of love letter. sketches of inventions we'd dreamed up together when I was little, photos of me at science fairs, handwritten notes. She found a way to make light from salt water. She asked me today if love means being seen. I didn't know how to answer. He had documented everything, silently, in secret, because they hadn't just pushed me away. They'd pushed us apart, and he let them, but not entirely. He left a trace, a thread, a map back to the truth. The final page read, "They'll try to say you were never meant to inherit anything. But this book, this proof, is yours. My legacy isn't what I built. It's you. You, Caroline, are the one who stayed curious when they grew cruel. You're not forgotten. You were chosen." I sat there for hours, the notebook cradled in my lap like a fragile ember still burning in the ashes of what used to be a family. He didn't leave me a house, or stocks, or bonds. He left me a truth that could burn everything down, or light the way forward. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. They were all there when I arrived at the lawyer's office the next morning. Emma in a tailored cream suit, skimming through papers like she already owned them. Aaron in a navy blazer, legs crossed, whispering to the family accountant. Mom sat to the side, wearing sunglasses indoors, not for grief, but for effect. I didn't say a word as I stepped inside. Just nodded politely and took a seat across from them. They froze, not visibly, but in the way people do when a shadow enters a room they thought was sealed. Emma offered a smile, too tight to be kind. "Oh, you got the time wrong. This meeting isn't necessary for—" "I know what this meeting is," I said, calm and quiet. Aaron's fingers curled around the chair arm. The lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, cleared his throat. "Caroline, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure if—" "I'm here to finalize my father's wishes," I replied. Mom finally spoke, removing her glasses. "There's nothing to finalize. You weren't listed." I placed the notebook gently on the table. Its worn leather cover thudded softly against the wood. "What's that?" Emma asked, too quickly. I opened to the first page, the one with the gold lettering and the words written in Dad's unmistakable hand. Reynolds reached for it with a frown. "I wasn't aware of any additional documents." "You weren't meant to be," I said. "Not until now." The room shifted. I felt it in the way Aaron leaned forward, in the way Emma bit her lip, in the way Mom went silent. Inside that notebook were more than words. It held proof, dates, diagrams, letters, reflections, private correspondence, mentorship records. My name was on every page, as his daughter, his legacy, his heir. Mr. Reynolds took the notebook carefully and began flipping through it. With each turn of a page, I watched their certainty start to drain. Emma's nails tapped faster. Aaron's knee bounced. They had erased me from the slideshow, from the seating chart, from the legal will. But not from him. He had saved everything they tried to destroy. And now, I was placing it on the record. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just showed up. At the exact moment they assumed I'd stay gone. And I laid the truth down, like a slow-burning fuse. Mr. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, the notebook now open in front of him like a legal confession. "This changes things." Emma shot up from her seat. "Wait, you can't just accept a random notebook. It's not notarized, it's in his handwriting," Reynolds said firmly. "I knew your father for 30 years. This is unquestionably his." Aaron's jaw clenched. "So what? Sentiment isn't a will. It's not binding." Reynolds didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled out a slim white folder from his briefcase. "Actually, there is one more addendum. Your father submitted it in person a month before he passed. Said it was for safekeeping until the time was right." I didn't understand what he meant, until now. He opened the folder and placed a single page in the center of the table. Typed, signed, stamped, Addendum to Last Will and Testament, Walter J. Harlow. To be enacted only upon the appearance and presentation of Caroline M. Harlow, with proof of paternal correspondence. Aaron stood abruptly. This is a setup. Reynolds ignored him. Under this clause, Miss Harlow is granted full ownership of her father's intellectual property, the lab, patents, and all associated grants, as well as the townhouse on Middleton Lane and the remaining funds in the private research trust. Emma looked like she'd swallowed glass. You mean the legacy fund? The one meant for expansion? Reynolds nodded. It was always hers, from the beginning. I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at them. Instead, I opened the notebook one last time and turned it toward them, to the page where Dad had drawn the two of us side by side in blueprint ink, smiling over a circuit board. Beneath it, in neat cursive, the one who stayed curious when they grew cold. For years, they tried to convince me I was invisible, but now, every word they'd erased was written back in ink, and for once, there was nothing they could do to overwrite it. Mom was the first to speak. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. I had no idea he filed an addendum. He never told me. Her voice was soft, but I knew that tone, the one that begged for innocence without admitting guilt. You were his wife, I said. He lived in your house. You didn't notice him drafting a whole legal document? She pursed her lips and said nothing. Aaron scoffed. This is insane. Dad barely even spoke to her the last few years. He couldn't, Mira said, stepping out from the corner where no one had noticed her until now. They turned as one. I was asked to witness that final notebook, she said. He had me scan pages. He recorded videos, all of it. He made sure there was proof. Emma stood slowly. Wait, you helped him? He trusted me, Mira replied evenly. Because he knew what was happening, how you shut her out, how the letters were disappearing, how every call she made mysteriously got missed. Her eyes settled on Emma. He asked you to update her contact info, twice. Emma's face flushed. I didn't know. Yes, you did, I said. You just didn't care. I turned to Aaron. You called me once. Do you remember? He blinked. Maybe? It was after the hospital scare. You said Dad didn't want to see me, that it would stress him out, but he wrote in his notebook that he kept asking when I'd visit. Aaron's lips parted, but nothing came out. And then I looked at Mom. You never asked me to come home. You never said goodbye to him in front of me. You erased me quietly, because it was easier to pretend I'd disappeared than explain why you let me go. Her eyes finally met mine. I didn't think you wanted to be part of this family anymore. I almost laughed, but didn't. I wanted to be seen. I took a deep breath and stood up, sliding the notebook back into my bag. You all spent so much time preserving the appearance of legacy, you forgot what builds one. Mira stepped forward and placed a single envelope on the table. For the record, she said quietly. Your father also filmed a message. It's in the safe. The silence that followed was absolute, and in that moment, I realized something. They weren't mad because they'd lost the inheritance. They were afraid because they'd lost control. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked around the room at the faces that once shaped my entire self-worth, and I saw them clearly, maybe for the first time. Not as monsters, not even as villains, just people. Flawed, scared, grasping people who didn't know how to love what they couldn't control. I don't need to be loved anymore, I said. My voice didn't shake. I need to be real. Emma opened her mouth, but no words came out. Aaron stared at the table. Mom? She just looked tired. Like the performance was over and she didn't know who she was without a role to play. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat, breaking the stillness. There's nothing left to contest. The estate will be divided per the updated will. I nodded. I'm not here to punish anyone. I just came to finish what he started. And I did. I stood, picked up my bag, and for the first time in my life, I didn't wait for anyone to follow me. I didn't look back for approval or apology. I didn't wonder what they were thinking. I left the office, walked out into the cold sunlight, and felt something unravel inside me. Not pain, not triumph, something quieter. Release. A few hours later, I got a text from Mira. Just 2 words. They're gone. And they were. There was no grand showdown, no press release, no second chance. Just silence. Real silence. Not the kind used to shame me or erase me, but the kind I finally owned. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had already become the woman they tried to prevent. The lab hadn't been touched in years. Dust blanketed the shelves, and the once buzzing whiteboards were now faded with half-erased equations. But the bones were strong. It took weeks to clear it out. I scrubbed until my hands were raw, repainted the walls, replaced old equipment. I found Dad's soldering kit in a drawer and cried. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. I renamed the place the Root Project. For every child who asked too many questions. For every girl who got told she was too quiet or not sharp enough. For people like me. We started small. Just me, a grant I applied for with trembling hands, and 2 volunteers who believed in the mission. We built work tables from salvaged wood. We rewired circuit boards. We taught kids how to fix what they were told to throw away. And I kept Dad's notebook in the glass case at the front of the room, open to page 34. A sketch we drew together when I was 12. A tiny solar-powered light made from bottle caps and copper wire. We'd called it the Hope Bulb. That sketch became our symbol. Every student who walked through our doors learned to build one. Not because it was impressive, but because it worked. Because it glowed. People began to notice. Local schools sent their brightest and their most overlooked. Donors came, quiet and curious. They didn't care about my name. They cared about the results. And every time I wanted to give up, when the pipes burst, when the power shut down, when a student cried from believing they weren't smart enough, I'd return to Dad's notebook, his scribbled messages. Remember, curiosity is courage. The world needs fixers, not just winners. One night, I found an old photo tucked into the back. Me, age 10, wearing one of Dad's huge button-downs, holding up a lopsided model of a windmill. On the back, he'd written, "Not perfect, but powerful." And so was I. Mornings are different now. I wake early, before the city hums awake, and sit by the wide window at the front of the lab. The air smells like solder, lavender, and pencil shavings. The lights flicker on slowly, as if stretching their arms into the day. Outside, a breeze rustles the low maple trees that Dad planted when he first built this place. The sunlight filters through their leaves like stained glass. I don't think about them much anymore. My siblings, my mother. Not with anger, not even with sadness. Just distance. They exist somewhere behind me, like an echo that no longer belongs in this house. Instead, I think about Kai, the kid who once thought he was stupid because he couldn't sit still in school. Last week, he built his first water filtration prototype, or Lily, who came to me crying because no one had ever told her girls could be engineers. She sleeps with her hope bulb on every night now. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of myself in their eyes, the version of me who had to grow up doubting she mattered. But now, she doesn't hide in corners. She teaches in front of a whiteboard. One evening, I stood in the lab alone and wound Dad's old watch. The one Mira gave back to me after the dust settled. It still ticked. He didn't leave me wealth. He left me time. He left me space. He left me the silence they never could take. And in that silence, I built something unshakable. I stepped out into the dusk one night, the wind tugging at my sleeves, the last orange rays casting long shadows, and I whispered it out loud, to no one in particular. Some relationships are roots, others are weights. I chose to keep the ones that help me grow. And now, I begin again.